Today, I'm going to try to quickly update everyone who might not be at the front line in this as to what the advertisers are doing to help the measurement of television and digital, which is a wonderful thing for the advertisers to get directly involved. Now, in parallel to that, also, I'm going to touch upon what the MRC is doing to try to create an accreditation standard for the measurement of ROI. Now, these two things both, of course, rely on such measurements as impressions. Like, what is an impression becomes fundamental to both of those things. Now, first of all, why did the advertisers get involved? It's because of frequency and the desire to make advertising a pleasurable experience for consumers. There has always been a thing, always been meaning since the beginning of digital, called frequency capping. And frequency capping allows you within one media silo to say, after this ID has seen 5 of my ads, stop. Well, that's fine, but if you're buying 10 different media silos, Facebook, Google, et cetera, and they're not sharing, interchanging, interconnecting their information in any way, then you could cap each one of 10 at 5, and you could still get 50 frequency for your ad against this same poor person. So they're trying to fix that. And of course, the walled gardens, Facebook and Google, are the main problem because they don't intersperse their data with other people's ID graphs and to the same degree that most of the other media silos do. Hence, they're taking leadership in this. So both the MRC and the WFA, ANA, in their fine efforts, are now realizing that there's been some work that went before that the ARF has done for half a century, constantly rewriting and updating its media model. Now, it's called a media model, but it's really a model of what effect do the media have at various levels. What's the first thing that they do when they strike a consumer? First thing that happens is either the consumer is exposed or not. Nothing can happen if it doesn't take place. That's the so-called ad impression. In the ARF model, that's the third level. There are 8 levels in the latest model. The latest update was done and published. It was done between 1999 and 2003 and published in 2003. It's called the 2003 model. I suggest you take a look at it. Both the WFA, ANA, and the MRC are now taking a close look at it, and we're having a very useful public conversation about it. 2 people are playing a big role in this. Tony Jarvis, who I think was the incendiary force that held everyone's feet to the fire and said, you have to look at this if you're going to be trying to do what you're trying to do. And everybody woke up to that, and that was a wonderful wake-up call. And Ed Papazian, who has always been the most studious and encyclopedic of the observers, and of course was a partner to Irwin Efron. Irwin and I and Jim Spaeth and other folks created that 2003 model. Just one more thing, and I think we'll be complete in terms of what you need to know, is there's discussion about the impression and how it's measured. And if you look in the ARF media model, you see, and especially if you read the further writings of Irwin Efron, you see that there's, for each level, from exposure through attention, through persuasion, and so on, sales, there's what you want to measure and the closest you can come to it. There's the operationalist definition of how close you can come. So what I mean, and I'll just illustrate the one key level. At the ad exposure level, the psychological, logical definition has always been opportunity to see, or in radio, hear, and even in TV, opportunity to see or hear. So what is the opportunity to see or hear? Well, it's someone in proximity to a device, TV or radio, with eyes and ears open, meaning they're not sleeping, etc. That's what we're trying to get for that level. But as Irwin eloquently pointed out, and everything he pointed out, he did so eloquently, You can't do that on a practical basis. It's, from a practical point of view, impossible to measure that. The closest thing that we can come to that today, uh, that's missaid. We can actually get closer, but we're not doing it. And I'll explain that in a moment. But where we are today is people meters, which are really electronic diaries. They require the person to subjectively respond, whether they are viewing or not, by pressing their button or taking their button out of press. That's the people meter. We call it a meter, but it's really an electronic diary. It doesn't function passively. You have to do it. You, the viewer, has to do it. So the definition of an opportunity to see is the button's pressed in when the ad comes on. Now, you may have left the room. You pressed it in when you started watching the show. It didn't occur to you if you're going to leave the room for a minute that you have to take the button out, even though it's part of the instructions. Most people apparently don't really do that. And so what we find, as Ed Papazian points out, is that you may need 2 to 3 ad exposures as defined operationally, i.e. Nielsen People Meter and people meters around the world. You may need 2 or 3 of those exposures to get a real people opportunity to see. So the next level up, of course, is where you get into the eyes on the screen, things like T-vision. Now, the reason I said that we can do better is because there's passive people meters. Passive people meters can get us closer to a true person impression without having to depend on people pushing their buttons in. We had been heading towards, if you look at 1987, R.D. Percy had a passive people meter in 1,000 homes in New York City and was working on rolling it out to the country. They weren't able to make a go of it economically. At the same time, Nielsen was getting ready to do their own with Sarnoff, with face recognition. But as soon as the competition went away, Nielsen said, well, we don't need to go passive. But there'll be a rethinking of that now, and I think that's a very good thing.